biggest water supplier is £14 billion in debt. Environment Minister Rebecca Powell says their 15 million customers should rest assured their water supplies will be protected. Ofcom has launched an investigation into BT after disruption to the 999 emergency call service at the weekend. The communications watchdog says it's going to look into the incident to find out whether or not the telecommunications giant failed to comply with its regulatory duties. Emergency calls in some areas were unable to connect to an operator for a few hours. BT, which manages the 999 phone system, apologised sincerely for the UK-wide disruption, the company taking nearly 3 hours to tell the government there was a problem. Let's bring you up to date with events in Paris, where rioting has entered a second day after a 17-year-old delivery driver was shot dead by police at a traffic stop. 31 people have been arrested so far in the clashes that have followed that incident, with 2,000 police officers being deployed to the streets. Protesters have burnt out cars and buildings. Footage on social media shows 2 officers beside a car, with one appearing to shoot at the driver as the car pulls away. A police officer is being investigated. French President Emmanuel Macron yesterday labelling the shooting as unexplainable and inexcusable. Now, Madonna has had to postpone her world tour after falling ill and being admitted into intensive care. Her talent manager said Madonna had developed a serious bacterial infection, which led to pausing all her show commitments. But he says her health is now showing signs of improvement, and doctors are saying a full recovery is expected. The 64-year-old was due to start her Celebration global tour next month. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight, 2 headliner OGs, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. How are you, gentlemen? All right?
Good man, respect.
Excellent. Respect to you too.
Yeah, loving life.
Are you?
The top G.
Need a few more face tattoos to really pull off the OG thing, don't we, these days?
I've got a couple, but I'm working on them. I'd like to say a few more.
You just grow the beard over them occasionally?
Yeah, just for this.
I've got a few little tears here from...
Somebody said the other day a lot of rappers these days look like a desk in detention. Anyway, that's not a look we've got yet, but you never know, we could get bored. Let's have a look at the front pages. The Telegraph kick us off. Government prepares to take over water firms. We have The Guardian. I don't know whether you're seeing that. No, we're not getting it on our screen, but anyway, I'll talk you through them. The Guardian, crisis talks as Thames Water faces £10 billion deficit. The Times have DIY kits. Here they are. The Times have DIY kits for midlife MOT to help drive down illness. The Daily Mail, as we synchronise on the screen, have NHS doctors allowed to do private work on strike days, and that could be an example of that. Excellent. Madonna being rushed into hospital. The Mirror, ISIS plots major UK terror attack. And finally, the Daily Star with the King's war on slugs and possibly Stingo too. Those were your front pages. So we begin with The Guardian, Josh, and the water story.
Water story, yeah. There's also a picture of a... well, I thought it was of England winning some cricket thing, but it's actually a cricketer holding someone. It looks like he's got someone out. Yeah, it was very impressive and obviously very strong, so well done for the health specialist. But yes, the big story is crisis talks as Thames Water faces £10 billion deficit. And this is Thames Water not having enough money to do the works that it needs to do. Of course, they have paid out nearly £2 billion in dividends to their shareholders, so that money was there. And it's interesting, the article here, at least on the cover, it doesn't mention China, because other articles have put a lot of pressure, because China owns about nearly 10% of
sovereign wealth fund.
Sovereign wealth fund, which also owns parts of Heathrow and I believe Northern Gas.
And I imagine the second biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, famously, and still per capita by far the largest, is Norway.
I think this has just overtaken it.
In total. But, per capita.
Oh, per capita,
But Norway probably got some of it as well, then, haven't they?
Well, Abu Dhabi is one of, but it's.
What are you huffing for, Nick? Do you feel that we should be going in harder on this?
No, it was just sort of the whole per capita debate. I was just sort of. I thought it was like a tiny bit, not the point. But sorry, that was. I usually keep that stuff inside.
Per capita is the most important qualification of any statistic you ever read.
Sorry.
I'm sure you do know this. But the interesting question is, I suppose, how. I mean, ownership of these things is dispersed through pension funds. Investors, very possibly the same people who are struggling to pay their water bill, will one day take ownership of
only
a
in different countries.
Possibly, but I think ours as well.
I actually did forget to pay my water bill once and got a debt collection letter. I'm like, bro, sort your own debts out. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit much in context of their massive debt. And people are talking about whether they have to nationalise or whether we should just regulate more. It is a bit disturbing that China owns that much of it, though, isn't it? When you realise that it's the CIC who report directly to the Chinese government. I don't know what the solution is, because obviously we invest in other countries, they invest in us, but it just feels a bit wrong that China are sort of launching this total war, and one of the things is that they're soft war and they own our water.
We took that risk 30 years ago when we privatised everything, and the French ended up owning most of our previously nationalised industries, if I remember rightly.
But it's funny because Cameron was hailing the golden age of the relationship with China, which they've now changed to an epoch-defining challenge. So it's like, we should have seen that one coming.
Golden ages don't last forever, Nick. We've got one other story on The Guardian, which I thought might be worth mentioning.
Oh, 10th of pupils in GCSE year absent each day. Yeah, this is... but basically, it's gone up a whole load since, obviously, lockdown.
Yeah,
essentially, it's just a bit. Yes, 70% since lockdown, and it's sort of it's a shame because they were really. It felt like it wasn't felt. Numbers show that they were really getting absences under control, and they also were lots of studies that proved that every day a child spends in school makes a difference to their grades, basically.
Right.
And next week, I just got to say that they're going to be on strike for 2 days, so the kids are going to be off for 2 days next week.
All the kids will be going in on those days, I expect. Just go, oh no,
yeah, exactly.
I was here.
So they basically need. It's just a shame that all of that positive steps that were taken over the last 10 years before that have now sort of gone to nothing.
Big question, I suppose, is to what extent any of those absences are legitimate. Whether we're looking at children who are unwell or have mental health issues, or whether they're just off down the amusement arcade.
Well, yes, the fact that it's gone up so much since they say COVID, I say lockdown. They're saying all these hard-won gains have been lost. The fact is, schools didn't need to be locked down. We thought we could just turn the country on and off like Windows 95. And this is one of the many ways that it doesn't work. And even people who are quite sort of normie and quite sort of bullish on lockdown have admitted to me that actually, the schools didn't need to be. I think that's a pretty normal view now. The schools didn't. Well,
we've got another story about whether the civil servants needed to go home as well, but we'll get onto that shortly. Let's have a look at the Mail, Nick.
Yeah, so the Mail has NHS doctors allowed to do private work on strike days, which is being called a kick in the teeth, and you can see why, because they make 128,000, and obviously a strike, one tends to traditionally think of it as to do with pay, but then on the side, if you can earn your money anyway when people can't get treatment, it's a bit much. It's kind of like, reminds me of, I knew a posh kid once who had been to Eton, and he said that he didn't want to, he was complaining about money. I was like, but haven't you got loads of money? He's like, oh yeah, but I don't want to touch my savings. And he said you might have to sell a painting or something. And you're like, so there's different levels.
I told you that in secret.
Sorry, mate. But it's like we're striking. Oh yeah, we're making 128,000 doing private work. That's different.
Yeah. Compartmentalisation's the secret of life. Absolutely.
And there's also Madonna. A pretty nice photo of Madonna. I think they've been quite kind to her with that photo. They've chosen something a few years.
Some of the other photos, including the Mirror, actually, we'll be looking at in a moment, have a more contemporary picture which might explain why she's exposed herself to strains of bacteria.
Yeah, well, she's gone into intensive care, and it's the first time Madonna's had surgery, and they're calling it a serious bacterial infection, also the name of her 7th album. But the reason I can feel I can joke a little bit is because they say she's doing a lot better and she's expected to make a full recovery. But if you were still offended, please direct your complaints to Lewis Schaefer.
Well, it's interesting looking through Twitter. Every alternate tweet is either, oh my God, it's my queen, you must come back, save me, and others, well, maybe you should pray to Baphomet or something, because a lot of people on Twitter really do seem to consider her to have taken such extraordinary liberties with everything they hold dear. I didn't realise she had this level of I don't know.
She's gone a bit. She's gone
I
a
just
bit.
think of her as a pop star.
She's gone a bit.
Yeah, well,
Satanist
the pop star.
Yeah.
Arguably, she's the last great icon.
From the 80s, because I guess Bruce is rock, isn't he?
80s and 90s, maybe.
Yeah,
You know,
she was the big three, Prince, Madonna and Jackson. Anyway, we go to the Mirror and an ISIS plot. I haven't heard of one of them for a while.
Yeah, ISIS plots major UK terror attack, which is quite terrifying. So the Mirror has been in Iraq for a week, hanging out with their top terrorist or counter-terrorism group. And the head of that group has basically just been driving around, shooting and killing loads of ISIS people and being like, look at us, we're doing a great job getting all these cells, and then reveals that there is an imminent attack. The intelligence services in the UK supposedly know. They can't tell us anything about it. They said this is just so if anybody wants to just be... It could be a car, could be a knife, it could be a gun or a bomb. The only thing they can say is that it will be in a public place. So it's very, very helpful.
Not very actionable, in fact. Just be slightly more anxious all the time.
Don't leave the house.
Unfocused nerves,
Yeah.
Upgrade your 360i subscription or whatever.
But I think the overall gist seems to be that ISIS is still out there, but they've got a lid on it and they are, essentially defeated.
Well, they have done well, to be fair. I mean, I don't know how many threats they faced, but there was a period, wasn't there? Was it 7 or 8 years ago? Wasn't it about 2015, Manchester, I think, wasn't it? And around that time in Europe as well, there were a series of extraordinary outrages that I felt, is this the new normal? This is not going to be much fun at all. And it has been dampened down quite significantly. I mean, I don't know what the... but there was that time, I think, like 30,000 jihadis, every town, every city. Actually, it's been pretty quiet since then, isn't it? Broadly speaking. So good luck to them. Carry on, lads. I say, finally, the star.
Which lads do you want to carry on?
The lads who are
the stopping them.
Lads,
okay.
That's crucial. Trying to get any more.
Matthew Sweet's just clipping that one up.
So let's do the start then. King's War on Slugs. This is a crucial story. So Alan Titchmarsh has been chatting to his mate, the King, and basically he's discovered that they both agree on something, which is that they're anti-slug. And the Royal Horticultural Society has removed slugs from their list of pests. But Charles is against that because he says, no, they're kind of the terrorists of the garden, if you like, eating up all his plants. And that's his war on slugs, essentially. It's not really a war, it's more of a sort of frustration.
Yeah.
Not really a war, because I think he's lost.
War is thrown around very quickly these days, isn't it? But I understand. I mean, it's nice that Titchmarsh and Charles have found something they can bond. There is always more that unites us, isn't there?
Yeah,
it's a hatred of slugs.
Well, they like they like to sort of sit around in the sun with magnifying glasses, and they just
slugs.
Titchmarsh and the King, and they like to just sort of burn the slugs.
Well, that's the best way to get rid of them. I went out in the back garden once. We had a lawn full of slugs. It was horrific. There was for some reason, a massive, like a swarm, a plague of them, like a biblical thing. And I did salt them, and it just killed the lawn. I should have done. I mean, I know it was quite cruel, but if I got up close with the tabletop shaker, I'd have been fine. But I had the big, like the catering size.
Famously, salting the earth tends to go
Yeah,
like
exactly. That, Carthage.
Do you have a garden?
Of course not.
Finally, we finished.
We
finished. That's our lot. That's it for part one. Join us in part two for American Vigilantes, Indian Ink, and Russian Roulette. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. I'm joined tonight by Josh Howie and Nick Dixon, and we're into the second section of the show where we penetrate the stories a little more deeply. Nick, news that Rishi Sunak has been caught signing official documents with special ink that can only be read by the light of the full moon. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct, Simon.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Rishi Sunak criticised for using erasable ink to make notes and sign documents, and it's a brilliant tactic. You say something like, I will stop the boats, then you erase it, and later they're like, you said you stopped the boats. Where? Where is it, bro? I can't see anything. So, yeah, it's a great tactic.
I will return the marbles.
Yeah, and it's a Pilot V fountain pen, which costs $4.25. I think he's being penalised here because I use a Pilot V5, or I used to, because one of the few that didn't smudge for lefties.
Right.
You know how writing is prejudiced against left-handed people.
Left-handers, yeah.
Exactly. And so maybe it's just he doesn't want to smudge, who knows? And the thing is, the key point, number 10 said the PM has never used the erase function and never would.
If you don't want to smudge your writing as a left-hander, you know what you need to do. Learn to write backwards.
Yes.
From left
and
across the page.
Redo the whole alphabet. Yeah, I know. This is a tough world on us, Simon. I never talk about it, but I've struggled.
Or you can write Hebrew.
You could do that, yes.
Just to get the key point of the story as well, Tom Brake, who heads up the Unlocked Democracy Group, he has told The Guardian that the use of pens like this further erodes public trust. And erasable ink, lost mobile phones and disappearing WhatsApp messages all add to a picture of a cavalier attitude towards ensuring government is accountable for its actions. And apparently Sunak's addicted to evasion, or he's just using a pen that he likes.
He's using disposable pens, and the only thing I would say about that is I don't think it adds to an aura of distrust or whatever the term was, but it does feel a bit tacky. I feel like, he's multi-millionaire, Chancellor of the Exchequer, moved up to number 10. I mean, most people would invest in a decent pen at that point.
I kind of feel like they should use, like, blood.
Yeah.
For, like, real... because you can't just get rid of blood. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that you wouldn't be able to erase. But, of course, in America, their system is that the presidents have to use ink, and as you know, all you have to do to prove that is you just go into Trump's bathroom and just find the documents and you'll see them all signed. And
that's
nothing,
raised by sauna steam.
He proves it to everyone.
It's quite a significant part of, what do they call, graphology and all that, is analysing inks, isn't it? You do chromatic breakdowns and studies of the ink to prove who wrote it and with which pen and all that sort of thing. It can be done, like when you analyse typewriting in a James Ellroy novel, they can tell that the W was slightly wonky, and that proves that the ransom note was written on that typewriter. Feels to me like Sunak is being very evasive with his mass-produced disposable.
At least it's cleverer than Johnson, just writing everything down in sort of messages and sending it to everyone.
That's true.
Yeah.
Over to the Metro now, Josh. This sounds like a scenario even Brass Eye might have found plausible and tasteless.
It's horrible, yeah. Paedophiles are using AI to generate lifelike images of child sexual abuse. So there's a documentary that isn't strangely mentioned in this article. They mentioned the BBC a few times, but I understand the whole purpose of this article is on the back of a BBC documentary into all of this.
Yeah.
And they've covered that people are using... I mean, this is the problem when new technology comes along, you're just going to get the sickos find a way to exploit it. And there's this software called Stable Diffusion, and they kind of... And these... Paedophiles
this is the stuff that generates images that look like album covers or sci-fi novels.
Exactly, but I thought that the AI software was specifically designed that you couldn't make stuff like this. That was my understanding of it. And actually, the point was, there's a village, I think, in Africa, where they they tested the AI and showed them all these horrible images to like teach the AI that this was stuff you shouldn't be making. So I don't know how this works, but they're saying that this is obviously terrible beyond just the evilness of it.
But just to be clear, this is people using a technology. We've all seen the AI-generated images, and some of them, a lot of them, say, look like Conan the Barbarian sort of artwork and that sort of thing. That seems to be quite popular. So I can easily imagine how that could then be pushed towards pornography of any kind. You're saying that the programmes, in theory, have been
told that you shouldn't be able to create sexualized images.
There's a kind of parental lock type thing.
That's the idea on it.
Take these prompts, so you have to find workarounds for these prompts.
I guess so. Yeah. So I don't know. But and so they're all sharing how to do it.
Do we feel? I mean, morally, Nick, let me ask you, because you're quite moral about this sort of thing. Do we feel it's...
As opposed to me being immoral, though.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you've got your own kids, but Nick is independent. But seriously, do we feel it is as despicable as child pornography, which is to say about as despicable as it gets, or is it even remotely slightly less worrying if a paedophile were to use an AI-generated image to get off on...
It's just as bad. I mean, they say here in the UK a pseudo image is treated the same as a real image and is illegal to possess, and I think that's completely correct. Yeah. And they're saying it can lead to the abuse of a live child. I think even if it doesn't, it's just as bad, even on its own terms.
And the problem, of course, they're saying is that it makes detection that much more difficult because they can say, oh, no, it's not real, it's just an AI one, and you won't know for sure. But I suspect part of the thrill for them comes from knowing that the child has been genuine. I don't know.
Terrific.
Well, this is... the fact is, almost all communications media over the last 50 years have been partly pushed forward by the pornographic market. VHS was largely, DVDs. A lot of this stuff has happened in the past, and because people like to find ways of being alone and being private and accessing forbidden material without being reliant on mass media, obviously, and so on. Anyway, we're independent now, and Subway vigilante Daniel Penny is hoping the jury don't flip a coin over his release.
Yeah, this is Daniel Penny pleads not guilty to manslaughter and homicide charges in Subway killing of Jordan Neely. Obviously, a very famous case everyone will probably know about, happened on the Subway. And this is a disgusting piece from The Independent because they're talking about the case and they say that they leave out key things about Jordan Neely, who was going around, a man who's over 6'2", threatening people. And the three things he was shouting were, I'm going to kill you, I'm prepared to go to jail for life, and I'm willing to die. Now, The Independent leaves out the I'm going to kill you one and just says he was yelling that he's not afraid to go to jail or die, which is a very different proposition.
And complaining that he was hungry, which just sounds like something you might say to someone on a bus.
Right, that part is true, but it's the angle on it, But it said Neely did not physically attack or specifically threaten anyone. Oh, great, he just threatened, though they do admit that he was making threats and scaring passengers. Now, as Penny said in his statement, he was also... The left-wing media's tried to make it a race thing, but, of course, one of the people that helped Neely was a person of colour. The people he was threatening were people of colour who thanked Penny. So you can't... Well, I think I might have said Neely when I meant Penny then, but anyway... Penny's a hero, and if you can't recognise that, you can't have a society, because if you punish the person who's protecting people selflessly at the risk of his own life from what seems like an out-of-control threat, then you have what people call a narco-tyranny. You're punishing the good person, and you're praising the criminal or the person who was at fault.
I will say, I think in this case... from what I understand, I would come down on your side. But obviously, at the same time, vigilantism isn't to be encouraged as a general proposition.
And someone did die.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, and it doesn't sound like this guy was a good guy. Like you say, with the threatening, but obviously he had a criminal past as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you know if he says I'm going to kill you and he's got a criminal violent past? He's not going to.
He doesn't know what his criminal violent past is. But the point is, he doesn't know what the past is.
Yeah, no one knows in that moment. And he's a Marine, a former Marine. He's going, I'm protecting.
Absolutely right to bring him down.
And he didn't mean to kill him either. He was still breathing when he left the headlock.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? That's what they will have to establish. Was he?
They say it was homicide, the actual... But I just want to say that I don't know how they're going to get a fair trial on this, and I thought what they could do is just ensure that all the jurors get to court on the subway, and then that way
that'll be fair. Prime them, yeah, I can see that, Josh. The Telegraph now, and an unwelcome statistic for a three-man panel to confront.
Indeed, 1 in 3 to retire in poverty despite vast state pension bill. So, yes, this is... or even though the state pension bill is 110 billion a year.
It's roughly half the entire welfare, isn't it?
Yeah, half the welfare bill. And people still aren't investing enough. And the real problem is people who don't own their own homes outright. So if they're paying rent, and certainly if people are paying... You're the only one paying rent, Nick. But if people...
I'm beginning to breathe again.
They're paying, yes, 70% of their retirement income on rent, and that goes up to 130% in London.
Yeah.
And, of course, this is a situation that's only going to get worse and worse as the years go by and as that bill goes up.
We've had a very interesting...
Every stat Josh mentioned there applied to me even more. You don't own all your home, check. In London, it's even worse, check. I'm like, is this deliberately targeted at me, Telegraph? I thought we were friends. Sorry.
So number one over there.
It has. I mean, of all the issues, it's kind of so boring, isn't it, that people don't pay attention to it for very long. But nothing has been much more badly handled over the last 30 years. Because it's approaching this slow-speed train crash.
Because every government gets scared.
Yeah.
They want to win those voters over.
Yeah.
And they're not doing the necessary steps. And when they do try and take those steps, like in France, you see what happens. Everyone kicks off.
And also, of course, the housing crisis, as they explain, segs into it so perfectly.
But as someone who's been largely self-employed, the whole pension thing is kind of a luxury to me. I've just started paying into one now at the advanced stage of 29. It seems like it's very... I mean, do you even expect a pension as a self-employed person?
No, I don't know. Well, I mean, I do own a house, so I mean, that's basically my thought. I will have as many lodgers as we can cram in there until the day I die. I mean, I suppose the only thing that you can do, of course, is go and live in another country. That's where the houses are cheaper and the living costs
or you
cheaper,
work longer, and they're saying here that everyone is going to have to go up to 69. I've got to be honest with you, I don't expect I'll ever stop working.
I doubt I will ever stop.
If GB News launch a Romanian wing, Simon, maybe I'll go over there with the top G. I don't know.
That's it for part 2. Coming up, civil servants working from their home office. Little pun there. LGBT marchers were only kidding. And Barbie is diverse, though the mansion remains pink. We will see you in a couple of minutes.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, Nick, we have more civil service malingering now, but the Office of Work and Pensions are taking it in their stride.
Oh, I see what you've done there, yeah, because it's Mel Stride, and that's his name. Yeah.
And that will help people to remember it.
Yeah, so the headline is half my staff work from home, admits Work and Pensions Secretary behind productivity drive. Not a particularly successful drive, perhaps, because only 50% are going. It was sometimes down to 40% attendance. And this is another, of course, post-lockdown phenomenon. People have realised we don't want to commute, we don't really like our jobs, we don't want to work with awful people, so we'll just stay at home, and it's almost impossible.
Awful. I love your hand gesture. Awful people.
Look, out non-stars.
People probably feel that way about me, but the thing is, of course, you don't want to get back in. Obviously, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg of GB News has had a pop at them, and he's talking about the link with inheritance tax penalties and how the delays in that due to incompetent civil servants are very unfair. So, yeah, it's just another one of these things you can't switch back on.
No, and I mean, there is a part of me thinks, well, maybe it isn't such a bad idea if people don't waste a couple of hours a day commuting and all the rest of it, but there have to be means by which to judge their productivity.
Well, there are productivity tests, and they have shown that actually there isn't a drop in productivity when people work from home.
Right.
So as long as there isn't, I don't see what the downside is. It also saves money on office space and everything. There is an argument, and I don't know how they would quantify this, is about innovation, you know, the getting together of people in the flesh, that kind of thing, the synergy that happens at that time.
Yes.
But in terms of sort of doing these kind of
effects, but I agree with you,
I'd like to see those polls, because certainly Elon Musk thinks there's a big drop-off. He said you can't work from home unless you have some extraordinary achievement and you prove that you really can hack it.
I think it might depend a little bit on how much creativity, ingenuity and so on is demanded. So possibly in a civil service branch, it might not matter that much. Possibly at Tesla it does. I know that there are places like the Santa Fe Institute, New Mexico, which is a sort of load of scientists working on different projects. It's kind of intended to basically be a kind of framing device for canteens. You know, most of the interesting stuff happens in the coffee breaks where people get together and chat. But that wouldn't necessarily, you know, you wouldn't feel there was any benefit to happening in all offices.
Yeah, if you're just sort of just punching forms or doing that kind of stuff, then I don't know.
The people who are missing out, of course, are the sandwich shops, aren't they? They are struggling, I would imagine, in a lot of Whitehall and the city.
It's nice to think of the real people.
Yeah, tough time to be in that line of work. Anyway, Josh, over to the Mail. It seems the self-proclaimed LGBT child abductors were just teasing after.
Yeah, they're a funny bunch, guys. Come on. LGBTQ activists defend drag queens who chanted, "We're coming for your children" during a parade in New York City and claim it was taken out of context. So this is on the weekend at the New York City Drag March, and basically that's what they shouted, "We're coming for your children." And then afterwards, a bunch of prominent activists have come out and said, no, don't look at that. We're just joking. And so, and actually, not only that, some of them have taken on the role of victim by saying, no, you're victim blaming us because it's used as a sort of
reclaiming it.
Yeah, we're reclaiming it, and it's used as sort of detrimental accusation towards us.
Well, clearly what it is, to an extent they're right, because clearly what it is they're going, we know this is your deepest fear. We know this is the thing that you think our secret agenda is, and yeah, we really are doing it. The trouble is that underneath that cloak of, yeah, we really are doing it, one or two of them might be really
actually doing it. They are doing it.
I'm not saying they all are by any means, although I have to be honest with you, when I saw them coming down the street on the footage, I didn't really care whether they were coming for my kids. I mean, I just wanted to have them all exterminated anyway. They're just such an extraordinarily, deliberately repulsive presentation of themselves. You know what I mean? Like,
they're appalling. I mean, I wouldn't use the word exterminate, but that's where we're different. But this is one of these where you look. They say it's taken out of context, then you look at the actual context, And it's still really bad. I mean, the context, this guy, Brian Griffin, who's the original organiser of the NYC Drag March, says it's all just words. It's all presented to fulfil their worst stereotypes of us. And he himself said he'd chanted obscene things in the past, like, kill, 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 we're coming to kill the mayor. How does that make it better? I'm struggling to see this.
Hey, guys, come on.
Yeah, and also, would you even, as a joke, chant in public, we're coming for your kids?
Well,
I personally
suppose
wouldn't.
I would say, as a joke, I wanted to exterminate them, but
Right. No, I think it was serious
looking
then.
strong. I mean, but I don't want to exterminate them. Let me be clear, but I do feel kind of like slightly horrified by them, and I would think I would see that if my children were seeing that. Even if it was just like...
They might not get the irony.
To them, yeah, exactly, would feel a bit scary.
Well, also, when you're saying this kind of stuff in an environment where there are other photos and footage of people where you're seeing their scrotum sacks and nude people and guys in nappies twerking, there's been some mad footage. And I just want to say the worst footage I saw from last week was a former trans, they-them woman standing up for women's rights in the middle of the market, being spat at, kicked, pushed. That was incredibly disturbing footage there.
Well, that's where
certainly not love
the
and
most
kindness.
Vicious fault line exists at the moment, right, I think. But anyway, Nick, from the hypothetical to the actual now in the Telegraph, and a sexual assault has taken place in a school lavatory that wasn't so gender neutral after all, it seems.
Yeah, Essex schoolgirls sexually assaulted in gender neutral toilets. Terrible story, and I think it was a 16-year-old boy, and they were in these. He was in a gender neutral toilet. And the police are saying there was a sexual assault they're looking into.
It's a bunch of sexual assaults.
Yes, sorry, a series of them. And there was no guidance. The guidance wasn't clear on mixed-sex toilets. There's been no impact assessment on the provision of gender-neutral lavatories. It doesn't have a written policy at the school. So this is the problem when you have these kind of. You don't have a clear policy. You allow gender-neutral toilets. This is what everyone's been talking about. That people will gaslight you and say it doesn't exist, but clearly it is happening.
Yeah. It looks very much like something where a school. I mean, we've obviously all heard recently that teacher in. On the cat thing, with whether or not anyone was identified as a cat, there was certainly a teacher who was speaking with an extraordinary amount of vitriol and hatred towards these sort of kids who weren't in the programme. And it's a similar thing, I suspect, with this arrangement. I mean, I'm guessing, but I can just imagine again a school just goes, let's have gender-neutral toilets. That's the way forward, you know. And
absolutely.
And 28% of them, sorry, they're supposed to have separate toilets for children 8 and over, but 28% of them are failing to do so.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence of girls just not using the toilets and going like next door into shopping centres and whatnot. Yeah. Because it's difficult being a young woman. It's difficult being a young man as well. And it's not like all young men are evil by or anything like that, or men, but you are going to get some wrong-uns. Yeah. And there is a reason why we've had these safe spaces, these separate spaces, and to see this kind of stuff happening. And you're right, how many of these people who've been pushing this ideology are going to be denying it now, pretending it didn't happen, or excusing it?
Or scolding kids who have brought...
How dare you bring it up?
I don't like it, Well, I think that one is going to run for a while. Barbie news now, however. Finally, Josh, we're on to Barbie. And the Telegraph assures us that preternaturally beautiful blonde bombshell Margot Robbie would absolutely not have appeared as Barbie had the range not included some diversity.
Yeah, exactly. Barbie star Margot Robbie only accepted role because of diverse dolls. That's what she's saying in an interview. I'm imagining if they hadn't had diverse dolls, she would have still done it with a couple mil more, whatever. And I love how they describe it. They go, the white, able-bodied Barbie. And it's like, well, technically she's not able-bodied, but she can't go to the toilet.
No, that's true.
She's got some issues.
She can't even walk.
So really...
And in fact, she's, quite seriously not able-bodied, because they did determine that if she were to actually be made flesh with those proportions, her bones would snap.
But she doesn't have any knees either.
No.
So that would also prevent her. But this is
heteronormative Barbie.
It's a slightly ridiculous thing.
Have you seen Down syndrome Barbie, by the way?
Yeah, I think we covered it, and I think it was a really good idea.
It's a nice idea, but I have to say they could not have made it more nuanced.
Oh, really?
You really had to squint at it to see that there was a very, very slightly different eye shape.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. I'm not saying that there should have been. I don't know what the possibilities were, but it was a real kind of token gesture, to be honest. I don't know what else they could do.
Imagine just like Margot Robbie has made a token gesture.
She's making a token virtue signalling gesture. I mean, she's accepted the role, as you say, and she's sort of, it's absurd. And And also, this idea Barbie has to represent everyone, has to be a perfect Barbie for each thing. I mean, Barbie's just one type of character, basically a Margot Robbie type of character, like she played in Wolf of Wall Street. Why does she have to be representative of all women?
Yeah, but this has happened over the last 30, 40 years through the toys. They have been doing this for a long time. There is a funny photo of all the cast, all the female cast sitting in a row, all these other Barbies, and then someone wrote, "Spot the man," and it's all these women, and then there's obviously a trans woman at the end. It's just like, I'm sorry, that's a biological male.
Yeah, Barbie, that's a Barbie Ken. I don't know what they would use for that. Well, I suppose the Barbie doll represents a sort of avatar in a child's imagination, a bit like Action Man used to, right? I would not have been interested in having an Action Man who had
it's aspirational.
Belly, or even just not visible muscles. You know, you're kind of. Of course, you're pursuing a fantasy version.
It's like He-Man. It is exactly silly. And Ken, by the way, is some sort of pathetic idiot in the movie. I hear, like some feckless.
As opposed to the real Ken, who's a great guy.
He's a total chat.
Terrible slur. Nick, Independent Now, to paraphrase Paul McCartney, Swedes and Turkey live together in perfect harmony, side by side on my Christmas dinner plate. There we go.
OK. Wow. All right. Well, now let's do this very serious
boozy
story.
lunch, was it?
This is actually a bit of a segue, because it's man tears up and burns Koran in protest approved by Swedish police. So the police granted permission for this demonstration, and then they charged him with agitation against an ethnic or national group, which seems a bit harsh. And
I want to mention Turkey are specifically involved.
They are involved, yes, because they're in a diplomatic row with them now about joining NATO and so on. And it's a very, very tricky topic. Obviously, it's not tasteful to burn a Koran, and obviously I respect Islam and Muslims and probably have a lot more in common with them than the new rainbow cult, for example. But it's interesting, we saw Lawrence Fox burn the rainbow flag that day. So it sort of raises the question, should you be able to burn something like this? And I think my answer is really we should be a Christian country like we've always been, and there should be a certain reverence for Christianity, which should have a special place, but everything else I'm not sure about. But in lieu of that, because that's never going to happen, you probably have to have a society where you can burn pretty much any icon. Otherwise, the only alternative is you have to say, well, you can't burn that or that, and then suddenly you can't do anything. Scientology can't be burned, etc., etc.
Social taboos are the way to deal with it. And I mean, it's something my father always used to say, that you don't want to stoop to their level, specifically on flag burning and so on. You know, he always felt that was an underhand tactic to create offence without taking on any danger to yourself, I suppose, to some extent.
It's not something I would do, but it's whether it should be illegal.
I don't know if it's the same chap, by the way. There is a guy who made several YouTube videos. I thought he was Dutch or Danish rather than Swedish, but I don't know. The burning the Quran thing does seem to be a little bit in the kind of, I don't know, the Scandi countries a little bit.
Well, it is They're obviously not upset. I'm not happy about it, the Swedish authorities, because it's messing with, as you say, their NATO entry. Turkey got very up. This happened before, a few months ago in January, and NATO, and that caused a pausing of the NATO progression there. Yeah. And the argument is it going to happen again?
Yeah. Well, that would be a very foolish shot in the foot. That's all for part 3. In the final section, we've got Putin on the moon, Great Cthulhu lies dreaming, and so do his eldritch octopoid spawn, and sexist anthropology. See you in a couple of minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, we're going to read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So, Josh, the Daily Star, kick us off with alarming news about the next target for Vladimir Putin's expansionist plans.
Indeed, if he's around. Putin's set to invade the moon with 20 million rocket heading for the lunar South Pole. Now, in the sort of space race scale of things, 20 million pounds is not a huge amount of money. Also, the question is... and also they're talking about it being an invasion, but I believe you have to have people, maybe. Yeah. Also, this is just a rocket.
Just a discovery.
Yeah, and they're going to send it to the south part of the moon and maybe do some drilling. But there is an interesting thought about in terms of whether the embargo is working, because if they can gather the technology necessary to make this actually happen, because my understanding was that they'd be running, they don't have the ability to make a lot of the equipment themselves, right? In terms of for weapons and whatnot. And I imagine that would extend also to space travel. So
you think they've been given Indian kit or something?
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Or maybe it's like E.T. and they built stuff out of sort of toys.
Yeah,
that could be it as well. It's one or the other. It's India. Or it's eating.
I mean, I wonder whether that is the point of it. Obviously, we all know the space race in the 60s was largely an expression, a sort of proxy war for the Cold War, wasn't it? So I wonder whether that's what's going on here.
Well, yeah, firstly, he's taken this coup very badly. I knew he was angry the other day, but he's like, right, I'm going to go and drill the moon. Yeah. That's how angry he is. But secondly, on your point, Simon, this is good, because when you had the space race, it inspired the US. You know, Russia was going to get to the moon, so then the US pretended to get to the moon first. And so that was it. So it was inspiring. So now the US will get up there and start drilling the moon, and that'll be great. I don't know why.
I want to say, I do genuinely I don't believe the fake moon landing conspiracies, but it was very interesting. I listened to the Public Service Broadcasting album. Do you know that, Race for Space? They're a kind of electronic dance music. They use sound collages from the space race over the top.
That's where I get all my conspiracy theories.
It's it's great. It's just very good entertainment, and it's all original. It starts off with Jack Kennedy announcing the race for space, and then it cuts to Sputnik, American broadcasters acknowledging Yuri Gagarin is in space and so on. And you get a very good sense over the course of about 40 minutes of slightly arty music of just how extraordinarily consistent the Soviet advantage was throughout most of the 60s until America won with the final battle, putting a man on the moon.
It was a dodgy footage.
Yeah. I mean, you can certainly see in that context, crammed into 40 minutes, you can see the motive.
Does Lewis even believe in the moon?
I doubt it.
The moon is cheese and therefore haram. Nick, Metro now, and the connection between high IQ and women forming a queue is laid bare.
Nice. That was good. Yeah. Want to have a child with a clever man prepared to wait. And the results are in, guys. And if you're smarter, basically, you have kids later in life. I say as the only one on the panel without children.
How late can you wait?
It's not me saying it. So, you know, the longer you wait, the smarter you are, and so the results are in. And basically, it's guys who scored in the top 20% for cognitive ability had their first child at 30. So imagine if you wait till 40, you're even smarter.
Yeah.
While the bottom 20% became dads at 27. So, yes, and then the reasons for it are basically they don't know, but they're saying they remain in education longer and they have more...
So you know how to use contraception.
Yeah.
Could be that.
The reason is high IQ is the ability to abstract generalisations from a specific example. And they are able to abstract the generalisation of what will happen if they have children. They're able
Life is over.
They'll have to deal with them and not get any sleep. And like that, hey, that was my thinking.
I do
137 I got.
I do think it's a worry, though. Sorry?
I got 137 on my men's test, but you got higher, didn't you?
Well, we're both in. But
it also says that,
and Jimmy
true intelligence is people having more children. The more children you have, the more intelligent you are.
Oh, absolutely.
Once you have them late, yeah.
So they win that one.
That's the caveat.
Well, my father would certainly agree with that, probably. Yeah.
If you hadn't killed him with your having too many children, how many did he have?
What, Bertold?
Yeah, your dad.
Somewhere between 600 and 1,000. You know that, right?
No.
Yeah.
What?
You do know that. Did
no,
you
I
not
didn't
know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, OK.
My father is a sperm donor.
He got around.
I didn't know that. Gosh,
yeah.
No. Is this one of your shows? Was this one of your Edinburgh shows?
High testosterone.
But,
I didn't know that, no.
Yes.
Wow.
He fathered...
He was a cad.
think he's still the leader, although there's a lot of them coming out of the woodwork just lately. But
your wife doesn't look like you, does she?
No, I'm all right on that front, but no doubt statistically, sooner or later. Anyway,
wow.
We've got a couple more to get through.
I look like you. That's terrifying.
Josh, blue tits now, and some useful tips for men on the pool.
Female blue tits find repetitive tweeting a turn-on. Obviously, this has nothing to do with the website. But they've done a lot of tests. They put some speakers out in woods, and they don't know 100% why. But if you can mimic the same pattern over and over again, that brings out the ladies.
Yeah.
And then, just in case they get bored, then you've got to change up the pattern, and then you've got to be able to repeat that. So it's be able to do both. Have your mix it up. And be able to
as well.
Kind of like dance music. It's like a heavy repetitive beat, but then change it occasionally.
Superstar DJ.
Can I just say they're looking for like how successful birds are in mating. What they don't say is how successful people who hide speakers in woods to trick birds. How successful are they in mating? That's what I'd like to know.
That's why these high IQ men are not having any kids. Well, just want to do one more speaker.
I know, but these poor ladybirds came out from there to expect like some hot and Chippendale bird.
You don't mean ladybirds, you mean female birds.
Yeah,
female bird.
And then they tried to...
Ladybirds.
the speaker.
Birds.
Right, they tried it on with the speaker and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Guardian now, Nick. Yet more evidence that octopuses are, in fact, a species of alien genius.
They are, I think. Yeah, octopuses changing skin pattern while asleep may show they dream, research shows. Now, they don't know if it does, but basically because their changing colour tends to indicate things like social displays, threat displays, and hunting and so on. And then they see them do it in the sleep. It's like, are they doing the kind of like doggy dreams where the dog looks like he's running? Is it going through that? Or the more banal explanation is it just is refining its camouflage patterns, and they don't know. One way they induce sleep in the octopuses and try to do some more deep sleep was tickling them with a paintbrush and keeping them awake for 2 days. Did anyone look into the ethics of this?
Yeah. It's also extraordinary what they'll do to octopuses, but they won't
that's their job. What's your job? Like meeting someone in a bar? Yeah, tickle octopuses. Yeah, lots of choice, though.
They are apparently incredibly intelligent, but they have no culture because they are not raised by their parents. I mean, they have no culture at all.
That's like they can't learn any inherited knowledge.
So
that's what people always say about.
Did you watch My Octopus Teacher?
Yeah. Really? And I read a book about them as well.
Oh, really?
Octopus Other Minds.
Okay, I really hated that documentary.
Oh.
Well, I just thought it was just like this forced profoundness that was like really just a guy having a mental health breakdown and just swimming every day to keep away from his family. That was my take on it.
They are extraordinary, though. The legs, the colour of the blood, they have different metal in their blood. I think they have copper instead of iron.
They've got 8 arms.
Well, that's the least of it.
Okay. That was the bit I got from the documentary.
Everyone knows that. They're not really arms. They're more like tongues.
Ugh.
Finally, Josh, evidence that in the world's least advanced societies, women do a lot of the hunting.
Indeed, yeah. Well, women actively hunt in 70% of hunter-gatherer societies still in existence. So the traditional idea within anthropology is that men go out there and do all the hunting and women do the gathering and the nuts and the whatnot. But they're showing that actually that is not the case, and because there's been that prism, they maybe need to go back and have a look at what the traditional
But here's my theory, right?
Okay,
tribes advance out of the hunter-gatherer stage through the development of culture and so on, and they need lots of protein to do that, because that's when you get a bit of time on your hands, and also that's good for the brain. So clearly, tribes that have lots of women in the hunting groups are not getting enough protein to advance beyond the hunting stage.
That's a very interesting thing. I mean, they did learn. Sorry, one more thing. I did do anthropology. Is that I just want to get my one thing out? Is that the actual meat only takes up about 10% of the diet. So it really is a way of just getting rid of the men, so the women can actually get stuff done.
My explanation is much more simple. It's just the Independent. It's propaganda from the Independent. If it's anything like their Daniel Penny story, it's probably completely fake.
Well, those are all perfectly palatable theories as far as I'm concerned. The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages. The Telegraph have government prepares to take over water firms, and cricket, man gets rid of Just Stop Oil protester. The Guardian, crisis talks as Thames Water faces £10 billion deficit. The Times, DIY kits for midlife MOT to help drive down illness. Daily Mail, the NHS doctors who are allowed to do private work on strike days. The Mirror have an ISIS plot to major UK terror attack. And finally, the Daily Star, King's War on slugs. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m, where Steve Allen will be joined by Josh and Lewis Schaefer. If you're watching at 5, stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you. Good night.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, the aftershocks from yesterday's TRIC Awards have still been rumbling on today, and quite extraordinarily, it would seem there are many that work in the television industry that don't like the way that you voted. No, they seem to object to it. I think some are even suggesting maybe you didn't know what you were voting for. Sound familiar? We'll also tonight be looking at the woke culture that exists within the RNLI as it comes up for its 200th birthday. A story tonight about Hastings that I think is genuinely shocking. And 15 years on from the murder of Ben Kinsella, we'll talk about knife crime and ask the question, why is it getting worse year after year? All of that in a moment, but first, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. And we start tonight with the news that the wreckage from the ill-fated Titan submersible has been recovered from the seabed in the North Atlantic. It's been brought ashore for the first time this afternoon. Let's show you, if you're watching on television, new pictures we got about an hour ago showing metal being hoisted up from a ship and unloaded. That's at the Canadian Coast Guard pier in Newfoundland. The first pictures of the sub after the news, of course, that it exploded in an hour and 45 minutes into its descent. The people on board were on their way to visit the wreckage of the Titanic. That happened on the 18th of June. All 5 people on board, we know, perished after the submersible suffered a catastrophic implosion underwater. Those pictures just through in the last hour. Now, also in the news today, Daniel Korski has pulled out of the race for the London mayor after a TV producer accused him of groping her a decade ago. In a statement this afternoon, he said he's withdrawing with a heavy heart, but that he also categorically denies the allegations. Daisy Goodwin made the formal complaint and Number 10 commented it was very serious and they urged any other complainants to come forward. Mr Korski says the pressure on his family and the inability to get a hearing for his message now makes it impossible for his campaign to continue. Mr Korski said no investigation has ever taken place and said, "I have been clear I would welcome and constructively participate in any investigation." Thames Water says it's working constructively with its shareholders to secure funding amid mounting concern over its financial stability. Contingency plans are being drawn up by the government, including a possible emergency nationalisation of the company. It's feared Thames Water is £14 billion in debt. The Environment Minister, Rebecca Powell, said their 15 million customers should rest assured their water supplies will be protected. Ofcom has launched an investigation into BT after disruption to the 999 emergency call service, which happened at the weekend. The communications watchdog says it's going to look into the incident to find out whether or not the telecoms giant failed to comply with its regulatory duties. BT, which manages the 999 system, apologised sincerely for the UK-wide disruption. Hundreds of steelworkers have been protesting outside Parliament today, the GMB union claiming almost 80% of jobs in the steel sector have gone in the last 40 years. Workers are now calling for a proper industrial strategy and relief from energy costs. The government says it is working closely with the sector to secure a sustainable, decarbonised and competitive future for steel. And 3 people were arrested today after Just Stop Oil disrupted the second Ashes test at Lord's. They ran onto the pitch. England wicket-keeper Johnny Bairstow, though, took matters into his own hands by picking up one of the protesters that had been attempting to throw orange paint powder onto the pitch. He carried the protester towards the grandstand to loud applause. Another protester was removed by the security team. Ground staff cleared away the paint. Just Stop Oil said they wanted to disrupt the match to demand action from the government on climate change. That's the news. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Oh, good evening. So the TRIC Awards yesterday, people were stunned and surprised. They really were, of course, that GB News won an award for its breakfast show, but they were absolutely mortified, many of them, that I won the TV News Presenter Award. They couldn't simply understand it, just as the same people couldn't understand the Brexit vote and so much else, because they all live inside their own little bubble. But yesterday, after the result, the organisation TRIC put out this tweet. And it was perfectly clear what it said. It says, "Congratulations to Nigel Farage, news presenter category, sponsored by Screen Hits." Well, that was fine, no problem at all. Middle of this morning, TRIC had deleted the tweet. I simply couldn't believe it. I commented, obviously, on it, and hundreds of people took to social media to say, you know, do you not respect our votes? Over 1 million people took part in this process. This was the first year that TRIC had opened the whole thing up to be just the public voting without the committee themselves having a big influence over it. Well, after my protest and those of others, the tweet was put back up. Interestingly, though, it was different to the first time round. Now, they are very pleased they put up a nice picture of me standing there with the trophy and a pint. But you'll notice the difference between the first tweet and the second tweet is that at Screen Hits, the sponsor of this particular category wasn't involved in the second tweet. So I think maybe we can work out quite clearly what went on here. Who are Screen Hits? Well, they're a streaming service, TV streaming service, run by Rose Adkins-Hulse, who is director, CEO and founder of Screen Hits TV. She's also a committee member of TRIC, and she's spoken in the past about, you know, how important it is. There's a lot of support from the public out there and from within the industry for all of this. But it also turns out that she's something of a political activist. Seems to be very enthusiastic about much of what the Black Lives Matter movement stood for, campaigned for, in whatever methods they chose. And I can't for certain say that the reason the tweet got put down was that Screen Hits didn't like the way that you had voted,